scandal left a ghost behind. Long before the red carpets, the paparazzi, and the PR machines, there was a man whose fall from grace was so catastrophic, so public, and so devastating that it still echoes through the industry today. But before we dig into this mesmerizing story, I just want to say welcome, seekers, to this week's The Haunting Truth. This is Woo, and with me, as always, is Judicial Jen, because she's
Woo!
ready to sift through three, that's right, I said three trials worth of lies, rumors, and half truths. But before we go to a hotel room in San Francisco, 1921, we must give the disclaimer. So, this episode contains historical accounts, legal controversy, and paranormal folklore. All claims are based on public records or anecdotal reports and are presented for storytelling purposes only. So, Jen, have you ever heard of Fatty Arbuckle?
I have heard of Fatty Arbuckle before.
Okay. Tell me what you know of Fatty Arbuckle.
So there was a lot of rumors about him. He
Mm-hmm.
was a very famous actor, I believe in the 1920s and 1930s, from
Mm-hmm.
my recollection. One of
Yep.
the biggest rumors, because he was a very large gentleman, is that he was in the middle of him having an amorous encounter with a woman and actually crushed her to death. So those are like some of the things, like the lore behind him that I'm aware of.
So, this goes to show you that what? 100 plus years after all of this happened, you still know basically what the paparazzi was pushing out back then. So you're right. So Fatty Arbuckle was his real name was Roscoe Conkling Arbuckle. He was born in 1887, and he was one of the biggest stars of the silent film era, literally and figuratively. Before the scandal that destroyed his career, he was a pioneer of the early slapstick film and had a major influence on Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton. What he was actually really known for was his gentle personality, his surprising agility. I'm thinking Chris Farley, big man being like really
Yeah.
agile, and physical comedy, right? This made him beloved by audiences and respected by his peers. And Buster Keaton, in fact, called him the funniest man I ever saw and the kindest. But the nickname Fatty, the one that everybody kind of remembers, was something he never liked. The nickname came from vaudeville and early film marketing, not from Arbuckle himself. It was a forced stage name. We've seen that over the years, especially in Hollywood, and producers and promoters in the 1910s insisted on calling him Fatty for a few reasons. One, because he was a large man; he was around 300 pounds. Two, slapstick comedy relied heavily on the physical stereotypes. And three, studios believed that audiences would remember a funny fat man, which they did. The nickname sold tickets and made him one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood at the time. Personally, he hated the nickname and preferred to be called Roscoe, often correcting people who called him Fatty kind of outside off screen. To him, Fatty was a caricature, it was a character, not him as a person. And his comedic identity was really built around kind of like we talk about physical slapstick comedy, falling through chairs,
Yeah.
breaking props, and being the big guy, that moved with surprising grace. And his size became the joke, even though he was actually incredibly athletic and could dance, jump, and perform stunts that most actors couldn't. But we all know Hollywood loves marketing, and Fatty was easy to print on posters, easy to remember, and easy to exploit. And unfortunately for him, the newspapers continued using Fatty because it made the scandal he was involved in much more sensational. So, now on to the scandal. Picture it, Sicily 1912. No, I'm just kidding. It's actually Labor Day weekend. 1921 in San Francisco. There is a party in full swing at the St. Francis Hotel. Music, champagne, you've got a whole room full of rising stars, and it's here that Suite 1219, as noted in the background there, would become one
Mhm.
of the most whispered about locations in Hollywood history. So, one of the partygoers is Virginia Carolina Rappe. She was a 26-year-old actress that was trying to make her way in a cutthroat industry. She was born in 1891 Chicago, and her life hadn't been an easy one. She lost her mom at the age of 11 to tuberculosis, aka consumption, as they called it back then. And then she spent the next 13 to 14 years living in poverty, shuffling between relatives in unstable homes, and really growing up fast. However, in addition to being beautiful, she was driven. And by her late teens, she was working as a model, fashion designer, and a silent film actress due to her own self promotion. Those who knew her described her as being outspoken and determined. And how true is that? Like, you think about it, this time, women, aren't don't count for much. And
Yeah,
then to
no,
make it
not
in
at
a
all.
cutthroat industry when you coming up from nothing with no stability and no support and build a career for yourself out in Chicago, I mean, that's kudos to her. She had something going on. So she hits 25 and decides that she's going to go to Hollywood. She was doing well in Chicago as a model, but Chicago had its limits and Hollywood was exploding at the time, and she wanted to act. So when she got to Hollywood, she really hit the ground running. She used her contacts in Chicago to get modeling gigs, which led to appearances in short films, which led to meeting her fiance, Henry Lehrman, a director. She wasn't yet a star, but she was a working, connected woman with some visibility, and it put her in the circle where she and two of her friends, Maud Delmont and Alice Blake, were guests at this 1921 hotel party on Labor Day weekend. So I've said quite a bit about Fatty and I've said quite a bit about Virginia. Do you have any questions or thoughts, or does this resonate with what you've heard?
So far it resonates with what I've heard. I also, and I don't know if I'm remembering this properly, but she was originally from Chicago.
Mhm.
And supposedly during this time, this was like Prohibition and everything else. So Al Capone was really big in Chicago. And apparently, rumor has it she had ties to him. And that's how she was getting very lucrative modeling gigs and et cetera, et cetera.
I wouldn't doubt it. I actually did when I was doing research for the case. It's interesting you put it that way because I did do some research to see whether Fatty was had ties to the mob, but I didn't do it if Virginia had ties to the mob. So I can't opine one way or another, but I wouldn't doubt it because you're right. It is prohibition. The mob was huge in Hollywood at the time, especially coming out of Chicago. So I wouldn't put it outside of the realm of possibility.
I don't know if it was him specifically or his gang. I think she was like gang affiliated, and it was
Mhm.
to get that kind of, you know, push for her to have like modeling careers and everything else along those lines. I'm not sure exactly who she was affiliated with, but I think it was somebody in Capone's group.
I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, they had ties, especially in the film industry, up and coming. That's where money's at. They're going to be involved at some point, and they
Yeah,
have.
and
They
they're going to
were
take a cut.
involved. Yeah, absolutely. So I wouldn't doubt it. Um, but going back to the party in the hotel, so what happened there really depends on who you ask, right?
Yeah.
So you already gave the one version that you heard, and then some witnesses at the party has just assumed that she was drunk and had a bad episode. But other multiple witnesses testified that she really began feeling sick early on at the party. She was hot, her stomach hurt, she was sweating, and she'd been drinking, although she had a sensitivity to alcohol. And we all know folks that have sensitivity to alcohol and drink anyway. It doesn't have good impacts with what you're doing. Um,
No.
so she had gone to Fatty's room 1219, to lie down. Arbuckle later said that when he entered his room, he found her fully clothed. She was on the floor. She was vomiting. She was screaming, "I'm dying," tearing at her clothes and writhing in obvious pain. So he and others tried to help her, kind of putting her up on the bed, bringing her some water, opening the windows for fresh air, and calling for help. And her friends that came with her actually came in and moved her to another room, tried to cool her down, and stayed with her for hours. Unfortunately, they called the doctor much too late, and she died 3 days later on September 9th, 1921. And here is where the scandal starts because Maud, her friend, one of the ones that helped move her from Fatty's room over to the new room, told the police Arbuckle did it. And that's all you need to start a media frenzy because we know rumors spread faster than fact. And the newspapers, hungry for scandal, printed every accusation that they could find. The press painted him as a monster, moral crusaders demanded his films be banned, Hollywood panicked, and Arbuckle was charged with manslaughter.
And it's interesting to me because the fact is that he called for help and all this other stuff. And of course you heard my version of
Yep.
like the sensationalism of like he basically rolled on top of her and suffocated this woman to death is like what or
Yeah.
crushed her is
Yeah.
the story that I heard.
Hmm.
And again, it was like, again, Hollywood gossip and everything else. And I heard it from my father because he was actually raised in the 40s.
Okay.
So I had
Yeah.
watched some Fatty Arbuckle films and he was like, yeah, here's the rumor about this guy.
Yeah. And the rumor, we'll go into it in a little bit more. So it's along the lines of what you're saying. I mean, obviously you hear rumors in very different variations, but what she actually intimated was slightly different. But,
Yeah,
again, we go to this time and all she had to do was say he did it. Even
yeah,
though there's witnesses everywhere, there's like he tried to help, she was in pain before he got there, da da da. He still ended up getting charged with manslaughter. So he goes to trial. Remember, I said there were three, so this is the first one. The first one starts November 1921. She died September 21. I just want to put that in comparison to our timing of court cases these days. They did this in less than 2 months. It takes years for someone
yeah,
to get to court these days. So, yeah, just wanted to bring that. It's craziness. Only 2 months after her death. And the prosecution's case was built almost entirely on Maud's accusation that he did it. She didn't testify, but they took her statement anyway. And it was involved moral outrage because they thought he did something wrong. You got the press frenzy and the idea that his size implied violence. And I think that's where you're coming from, where he rolled over and crushed her. The other thought was that they were in intimate relations
yeah.
and he ruptured a part of her. And that's what caused it. So that was the prosecution stake. In his defense, they had actual evidence that was presented as the medical findings, and I'll talk about those in a moment, and testimony from the witnesses who saw him try to help her. The jury ended up coming back split, with two jurors refusing to acquit, and one had reportedly said that she would vote guilty even if all of the other juries voted not guilty. So the outcome was 10 to 2 for acquittal, mistrial. The second trial, which happened in January to February of 1922. So, like 1 month later,
Yeah. I was about to say, I'm like,
I was
they're
like,
just burning and churning,
they're
man.
like, you know what? We're just going to keep on going. So, they kept him on the books. That one also came back with a hung jury. But in this case, it flipped. And now it was 8 to 4 for conviction. And in this one, the prosecutor painted Arbuckle as a symbol of Hollywood excess via character attacks, making him a warning with moral arguments. I'm hearing shades of her 420 episode in Reefer Madness
Yeah.
and emotional appeals. And they gained ground, but the defense was actually able to provide enough of a challenge that the jury ended up hung again. So we have another mistrial. Okay, so now we go to trial number three.
I thought it
First,
wasn't, I thought you couldn't do double jeopardy.
if it's a mistrial, you can.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Okay, okay.
He wasn't convicted or acquitted. It was just a NA, not applicable because they couldn't figure it out. So you can keep going. And I think the other one that I know of that kind of falls along these same lines more recently is Midnight in the Garden, Good and Evil. They tried
Yes.
they tried him a couple times too. I think he went to court 3 times for his as well. But before we go on to the third and last trial of Mr. Arbuckle, any thoughts on trials 1 and 2?
I just find it, well, one, yes, like everything is about propaganda. I
Mhm.
mean, you have to think of it that way. And also, yes, if you're a very large man, they're going to paint you as this monster, this beast, like all those kind of things. He's the boogeyman that lurks in the dark. He's going to be
Mhm.
preying upon your daughters, et cetera, et cetera. Everything's about propaganda at this time because they didn't have a lot of hard physical evidence, such as DNA. It was a
Mhm.
lot of just like working the block, working the case, doing everything on foot. And as we all know, psychologically now, when we've done case studies, that eyewitness accounts are 20% accurate.
Yeah, completely wrong. like all the time, which
Right.
amazes me to this day that they even rely on witness testimony and call that direct evidence. It's not direct. There's nothing direct about that. I mean, it's craziness,
Yes.
craziness. And yeah, they implied a lot about his size, but I think too, I want to almost call it kind of like the Bill Cosby effect, right? Because he was known for being the gentle giant, the comedic, the playful guy. Like, and if you look at his pictures, and I'll put them up there, he had a very like little boy face. He didn't look scary at all. So I think it just made it all the more shocking, that he came up for this and
And
sold
also, wasn't
newspapers
this
and
during Prohibition? So the fact that they were drinking and accessing was like a huge deal because
yes.
this is a time when everybody had the moral high ground.
Yes. And that does come up, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But so we're going to go to the last trial. So the last trial starts in March of 2022. So the first one was November 21, the second one was January 22. They're still on that streak. A month later in March, because it ended in February, the second one, in March they tried him again. So they kicked it off again. 3 trials in less than 6 months. Again, astonishing the timeline. But this one brought a change in tactics. The defense upped the ante on the medical evidence. And the medical evidence included an autopsy that showed the cause of her death was a ruptured bladder with a secondary abdominal infection. What I think is really crucial here, we talked a little bit about his size, maybe rupturing something. The rupture showed no signs of blunt force trauma, which is what was intimated by
Yeah.
Maud in her accusation against Arbuckle. And Virginia actually had a history confirmed by her friends and documentation of chronic cystitis and repeated urinary tract infections, both of which could result in a spontaneous rupture. Okay, so we've got all this medical
Yeah.
evidence then. So then the defense also destroyed the prosecution's timeline by proving that her symptoms had started before Arbuckle even entered the room. And then they also proved that her death could have been prevented had medical intervention been sought sooner, when the infection could have been treated, which it wasn't. Poor girl suffered for 48 hours with her friends kind of watching over her before they ended up calling for help. And it was too late.
Oh,
Yeah, imagine being
those are
in
not
that
some,
much
those are
pain.
not good friends.
Oh, we'll go into that as well, too. Yeah. So the defense also used the the prosecution's previous tactic of character attack and turned it on the key witness, Maud Delmont. So Maud, remember, was her friend that was with her that moved her from Fatty Arbuckle's room to the other room, kind of took care of her, and then accused Arbuckle of doing it. Um, but the defense was able to show that she, one, hadn't seen anything because she wasn't there as a witness, changed her story repeatedly, and was a professional grifter.
Oh,
So her method was she would target men with money and reputations to lose and blackmail them. And this is documented in police files in LA, Denver, and Chicago. She'd bring a young woman to a party, often someone vulnerable, pretty, trying to break into entertainment. Alcohol was involved, and as you noted, it's prohibition, so it's already illegal, so gives you a little bit more of a leverage there.
yep,
The woman would become sick, stressed, passed out, sometimes from alcohol, sometimes from medical issues, sometimes from circumstances that Delmont would help create. And then she would accuse a wealthy man of assault. And she'd claim he hurt her, he needs to pay, he attacked her, and then she'd demand money to make it go away. For all listening, go away was in air
yeah.
quotes. And then if the gentleman didn't pay, she'd threaten to go to the police, the newspapers, or even do a lawsuit unless he paid. Again, they would not put her on the stand because if she testified,
Shocker.
she knew she would be crucified. So she did the accusation. They found out all this about her, but they never put her on the stand. So this third time, jury goes out for their verdict. It took 6 minutes.
Oh, God.
5 of which were spent writing a statement. So they came back within 1 minute for a verdict of not guilty.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And then the statement said, acquittal is not enough for Roscoe Arbuckle. We feel a great injustice has been done him. And this type of apology from a jury has only happened a handful of times in American legal history. It's crazy. So he was exonerated, but the damage had been done. Even after the acquittal, his films were banned, his reputation was destroyed, he was blacklisted, and the studios erased his name from posters. And he became Hollywood's first canceled figure before decades before the term even existed. And he spent the rest of his life trying to rebuild his career directing under pseudonyms before dying at age 46 on the very day he signed a comeback contract.
Oh, that's horrible. And it's
This
all
poor guy.
because this chick, yes.
Yeah.
And she
Yeah,
let her, and she was supposedly taking care of her, so she let it get worse and worse, and
she
then
did.
just ended up letting her friend die because, as we know, Fatty Arbuckle is one who called for help and said, like, get her some help.
He did. And he sent her off with her friends. So he thought,
Yeah,
they got her. Like uh,
it's fine. I don't have to do anything. She's not my responsibility. She was somebody else's.
yeah,
That's just,
he called
it's
for help
insane to
and
think that because he was the biggest person, no pun intended, in the room, that he's the one that ended up getting charged.
yes, because of this person.
Oh, we can call Maud other names if we would like. I
I think
mean,
anybody, if wants to add it, I mean, we can't say it because we'll get we'll get taken off a video. But if anybody wants to send us some notes with what you'd like
yeah,
to call her creatively, that's fine. But yeah, and this wasn't the first time. She had convictions for fraud, like everything else previously. And
yeah. So Maud was a fraud. We're gonna go with that.
fraud mod. All right, we'll do
Yeah,
that. I'm never gonna be able to watch the actual show mod again because I'm
I
gonna think of
know. It's
this
gonna be,
lady.
yeah,
So the darkness, however, doesn't end there because room 1219 didn't just become infamous; it became haunted. So, for decades after, guests and staff at the St. Francis have reported sudden cold spots, knocking from inside the bathroom, lights flickering on and off, a woman crying behind the door, feelings of nausea and dizziness, kind of like the same symptoms that Virginia had experienced, and most chillingly, a shadowy female figure by the bed. Um, Housekeepers have told stories of seeing a woman in 1920s clothing reflected in the mirror only to turn around and see nobody there. And some hear a whisper, "Help me, please." So, in addition to the room, the elevators have their own reputation. They stop on the 12th floor, the Arbuckle floor, without being called. Doors open and close repeatedly, and they travel between the floors as if somebody invisible is riding them when nobody is in there. So, you and I have called this before, but for those who don't know it, it's called residual haunting, where the
yes.
emotional energy just replays itself like a broken record over and over and over again.
Or a film that repeats itself.
Yes, yes. And this case had plenty of emotional energy to charge that film with the fear, the chaos, the injustice, and the media frenzy that just never let up.
Oh my God, I just thought about this. Like, imagine having a UTI so bad that you pass away from it. She must have been in
And
horrible,
it's been
horrible,
frequent.
agonizing pain.
Yes. I mean, she was writhing on the floor and ripping at her clothes and screaming that she's dying. I can only imagine. And apparently, she had these frequently from even before she left Chicago, because it goes back, the documentation goes back that far. Um, so, yeah, no wonder you've got echoes of nausea and dizziness in the room when you're in there. So these haunting stories appear in Haunted San Francisco and Ghost Stories of San Francisco and local paranormal logs out there. They're not official records, of course, but they're consistent. And consistency is the backbone of folklore. But the haunting doesn't end in San Francisco because on old studio lots, especially the early Paramount stages that Fatty Arbuckle was on, people have reported footsteps in the empty dressing rooms, a heavy set man in a suit walking the catwalks, cold spots in the rooms that Arbuckle once used, and a shadow matching his silhouette. And these stories are in Hollywood Haunted by Laurie Jacobson and Ghost of Hollywood by Marla Brooks. So the question remains: like, do you think it's Arbuckle, a man destroyed by a crime he didn't commit, a spirit tied to a career that was taken from him? What do you
I
think?
mean, I think that he was definitely done an injustice. So yeah, obviously,
Yeah.
like if you think about it this way, if he had just signed this big deal and he was supposed to be on that lot, like he might be haunting that specific lot that he was supposed to be at. And let's be
Yeah.
honest, like all the Paramount lots and everything else, all the old lots are still the same ones
Yes.
that they were previously.
Yep.
They've just kind of, in Universal, they've all just kind of changed names over the years,
Hmm.
and they're still basically the same thing. So his ghost could be haunting that area. And especially,
Yeah.
I know that they say if like somebody dies in immense pain, there is a lot of residual energy and
Yeah.
haunting and everything else. So Virginia could still be in that room just kind of playing it on a loop. And that's why people continually see her.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I hope Maud is there, but it's just a couple doors down and maybe in the
Yeah, I
basement.
suppose I was somewhere else.
Yeah, it's very hot there, like a sauna. Um,
She's something. Wait till you see her pictures. It's gonna be she's something else when you see these pictures.
she,
Yeah. So yeah. So we know Hollywood loves a tragic ghost in his story, if nothing is not tragic. Which brings us to the question this week, right? So what is the haunting truth? Are the ghosts of Virginia and Arbuckle condemned to haunt the rooms that shape their demise, as we've just talked about? I tend to agree with you, Jen. I think there is some
yeah.
residual energy probably there. There's injustice on both of their sides. Um, Virginia probably, I mean, she died painfully and horribly, and she could have been saved, so maybe that's there. But Arbuckle, like he lost his life and his career, his reputation for no reason.
But
No
imagine,
reason at all.
yeah, imagine being Virginia though. She doesn't even have a name. So like when I was told this story,
Yeah.
like it was Fatty Arbuckle rolled over and crushed a woman who was next to him. She doesn't even have a name associated with it.
But isn't that common though? With a lot of like, you look at our serial killers, like you know them right off top. Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, Ted Bundy, Green River Killer. Can you, Kenneth Bianchi, the Boston Strangler? Can you remember any of the victims' names? Like you're gonna have to
I
like,
can remember, the sad thing is I don't remember. So I remember like, this sounds really sad, but like the scenario where they were killed.
mm-hmm,
And I can remember like their hair color and everything else. And I
mm-hmm,
think I remember their first name for some of them, but
mm-hmm.
I don't know like their last names, if that makes sense. Like for Ted Bundy, like I know the sorority house and I can see
Yep,
the woman's
Chi Omega.
face
Yeah,
because
mm-hmm,
Chi Omega, like
mm-hmm,
I can see the woman's face that survived. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
But I think her first name was Anne. I'm not 100% sure, but like I can kind of for every single serial killer, I try to remember at least one person.
And I think that's the that's the that's what we try to do, right? Bring light to the victims. And I think we're doing better, especially now when we look at like the Idaho 4. I can name
Yes.
those victims, right?
Yeah.
I think we're getting better at bringing more detail to it, but from 100 years ago, just a girl at a party.
Yeah.
So yeah, so she's got some injustice that she's working through, and
I think
yeah, him too.
I have to say one of the hardest things, and I don't talk about like my personal life too much, but
Hmm.
one of the things I heard, I was a witness for my job in a courtroom, and there was these people, and they were so upset because they were victims, and the people across from them were basically the people who had perpetrated, they had burglarized their home, and they were laughing at them in their face, and the
Yeah.
prosecutor looked at them and said, "There is no victim's rights." And walked away.
Ooh. No, I would punch that prosecutor in the face because there is victims' rights, and they've actually been making strides to apply them more broadly and take them into account when it
Well,
comes
this
to.
was tw 25 years ago,
I
I'm
would
gonna
say the
say.
victims' right expansion has probably been more recent than that
Yeah,
because, they're supposed to be notified now when somebody's getting released. They're supposed to be notified. They're supposed to be consulted with when it comes to how do you want
yeah.
to, the person
The
to be
deals to be done. And
punished
back
and
then,
yeah.
yeah, how do you want
Hmm.
them to be punished? Should we accept the plea deal?
Yep.
They weren't consulted with
They
anything
weren't.
whatsoever. And these
Yeah.
horrible people were just laughing in their face. And they
Ugh.
knew where they lived and that they could victimize them again. And
Yeah, that's
they couldn't do
terrible.
anything about it.
That's terrible. Yeah. I like to think. that we've evolved since then.
Yeah.
But besides the ghost, I think probably for me, two things that are actually more haunting to me than the ghosts that are out there is one, that amoral liars can have such a destructive effect on lives with only rumor as their weapon.
Yes.
Like the fact that this poor guy had to go through all of this and mugshots and lost everything just due to one
I mean,
fraud.
that's social media today, though. Like
That's
somebody
exactly it.
does
And
one
that's the second
accuracy and
part.
it's just wildfire.
And that's the second part because we learned way back when in 1921 that scandal sells. And once the narrative takes hold, it's almost impossible to escape. You're still
Yeah.
hearing the same thing. So, I mean, I'm thinking, maybe the ghost isn't in room 1219. It's in the way that we tell the stories and the way we judge and the way that we consume tragedy like entertainment.
Yeah.
Um, so that was the more of the haunting truth for me. So, until next week's folks, this is The Haunting Truth, and we want to thank you for joining us as we dug through one of Hollywood's first chapters of rumor and tragedy. And just remember, seekers, that sometimes the scary ones aren't the ghost, it's the real people looking to capitalize on scandal and misfortune.
All right. Well, bye,
That's it from
everybody.
me. Bye, everybody.